And I hope that your week's been going well. It's a nice time of the year, beginning with Thanksgiving. We we begin by being grateful and focus on the renewal of a year, the ending of one, and although usually the renewal is in spring, the change of calendar makes us think about new times. Let's see. And so, excuse me. Sorry. Hold on a second. Let's see. Um, okay. Okay. I'm sorry that that was a glitch. Okay. Um, I've been looking at videos of Dolores Cannon and the non-reality of our world. It's something that Joel teaches. It's also a Buddhist teaching. And I would recommend Dolores Cannon to those of you who feel that you might want a little bit more information about understanding the physics and the just other ways of having that explained, that we are thoughts and not the non-reality of this world's appearances. I know that can be very hard to understand and follow, and I guess I've been working on it most of my life because, uh, well, this lesson came up in my helping someone recently, that when we're going through something, especially if something's physical, it's really hard to nothingize and to impersonalize. If you have an illness or a disease condition that you can impersonalize, you can say, look, I didn't cause this, it just happened to me. I caught this illness, or this condition is in my family. I was hurt in an accident. Um, it's it's still difficult, but you can conceive of it not being your fault. So impersonalizing, but to nothingize, to say that, this condition really has no power because it doesn't really exist. It's not spiritual. God didn't make it. If God didn't make it, it's not real. And yet you're hurting. You've got a toothache. You've got a broken bone. You've got some other malady. That's when a person who can help you comes in, because the nothingizing can be done when we're not experiencing the condition. But when we are, it's really difficult. So please don't be shy about that. Please ask for help if you need it. It's good for all of us. It's good for the patient and for the practitioner. Okay, that said, I think we'll go straight into the reading today. I'm going to continue with the second San Francisco lecture series, and that will present to us those early lessons of Joel. And I think that the early work can sometimes be more easy to follow. And yet it's also really, really idealistic on some levels. If you do A, this will happen. And then if it doesn't happen, you feel personally responsible. You're not good enough. You didn't do it well enough. You didn't get it. You thought you got it, but you didn't, because you have this situation that you're facing. Later on in life, Joel realized that wasn't always the case, and his life reflected that. So this is in my publication. It was on Lulu, page 59. In Orthodox religions, it is agreed that life is eternal, but that the body is not eternal. In the spiritual sense of life, life and body are one. Life is the substance, body is the form in which that substance appears. Suppose we had here a great block of mahogany, and out of that block we formed a desk. Mahogany would be the substance, and the desk would be the form. Then you might ask, how long can this desk last? Well, it can last as long as the mahogany lasts. When the mahogany comes to an end, the desk will come to an end. Desk is merely a name given to mahogany in that particular form. Is that clear? Now, life is what I am. Life is what is looking out from the back of my eyes. It is consciousness. It is spirit or soul. That is why we say that the eyes are the windows of the soul. Place me right back here where I seem to be and really am. God, spirit, or soul, that is consciousness. What you are seeing here is the form. This is the form in which the consciousness appears. If I can hold to that in spite of the mesmerism of world beliefs, then I can maintain myself here in this form and for as long as I can hold that realization. When I turn to the mesmerism of the world belief in a life of 80 years and 10, or perhaps to the human belief of being lonesome because all my friends and relatives are gone and there is a new generation around, all of these things can remove me from this realization. It is the terrible part of mesmerism that it can do this. You have to be most alert when you turn to the spiritual way of life. Temptation lies on every side. It is not always a physical thing, not a physical illness, but these invisible little foxes like lonesomeness and fear that hypnotize. We exist as consciousness, that infinite spiritual consciousness. And your body is the temple of the living God. Your body is the form. Your body is form which consciousness has fashioned in order to express through the individual that infinite form and spirit. Judging from appearances, the church of today has failed. Its failures become more and more pronounced. Because of that, it becomes necessary to be more aware of truth than we ever were before. Some time ago, Rabbi Liebman, then one of the leading rabbis of this country, wrote a book called Peace of Mind. Almost every page of that book says religion is a failure. This book turns you to psychology, tells you that you must learn psychological truth, tells you to turn to psychiatry, to philosophy. It is a strange thing we must do, turn from religion to the kingdom of the human mind, almost defying it. And that rabbi is not the only one. In Omnibook magazine for October 1948, there is this condensation of the book, A Guide to Confident Living. This book was written by a minister of one of our oldest Protestant churches. Almost every page of this book, too, says, turn to psychology, turn to your mind. Think of that, not to God. Turn to the mind to find how to obtain a happy marriage. A man consults a minister because he wants happiness brought into his family. The wife, too, comes. She's told she should keep her petticoat up above the hem of her dress and should stay at home and make beds in the morning. But she says, I come for spiritual guidance, and you say these things to me, that these habits are the way to married happiness. Believe me, I'm not saying this in a sense of criticism, but to show you that there is a difference between spiritual living and merely improved belief. If in a marriage a wife does keep her petticoat where it belongs and her house clean and her beds made, is this the spiritual way of living? Not at all. Not all the cleanliness or good cooking in the world. Not being a good husband, a good mother, or a good wife will lead to spiritual living. This may be a part, yes. If one is leading a spiritual life, these things will follow naturally. You must beware of this belief that through psychology you will find God. Its conclusions do not sound much like Jesus saying, take no thought for your life, and so on. This minister tells us how to think our way into success, and he goes on all the way through in the same manner. Now, psychology can make you a much better human, but that's not what I'm referring to when I describe the spiritual way of living. What I have in mind is this. When you no longer believe that lands or dollars are supply, and you no longer believe that your heart, lungs, liver, or body is the governing factor of your life, when you believe that the life which you are is the governing factor of your body, you are commencing to live a spiritual life. We are told to improve our thinking. Let us just suppose for a moment that for reasons beyond our control, we are very sexual or very sensuous in our ways of thinking, and somebody says to change our thinking. How would you go about doing that? We would have a very difficult time. If we are in the position of having sexual or sensuous thoughts, it's not because we willed it that way, and nobody is more eager, perhaps, than we to change it. Or suppose we are embroiled in a poverty complex. Changing our thinking will not change our demonstration. But if once the Spirit of Christ enters our consciousness, how long would sensuousness or poverty remain there? In the spiritual way of living, we do not try to be better humans. We turn and try to become or to imbibe the Spirit of Christ, and let that Spirit of Christ erase all the disease and poverty. In the case of an alcoholic, you can't say, you stop drinking and then come to me and I'll give you a treatment. If you were able to stop your poverty thinking or your sensuous thoughts or your alcohol drinking, what need would you have for metaphysics or religion or psychology? You would find yourself already in the kingdom of heaven. When a practitioner becomes sufficiently clear and established in the spiritual way of life, when the practitioner no longer fears or hates error, so that his consciousness in some degree is like that of Jesus, who could say, I have overcome the world, then that practitioner brings you health of body, health of mind, or of purse. In other words, it is the Christ of the practitioner's consciousness that brings about the correction. It's not one human mind telling another human mind how to be better. The spiritual way of living is not being merely a good human. Becoming a good human will not of itself lift us to the spiritual life. It is that state of consciousness which knows the nature of God, which brings peace joy, harmony, and wholeness. Now we come to perhaps the most important part of this whole subject. What is God? On your understanding of that hinges your whole success in obtaining the spiritual way of living. As long as we think of God as something separate and apart from our own being, we will not attain the spiritual way of living. God is divine consciousness. But because God is infinite, God is the consciousness of every individual. As we've quoted here over and over, God is nearer to us than breathing, closer than hands and feet. How close is that? Why, it is right here, right where I am. Where God is, I am. I and my Father are one. This consciousness, which is infinity, is your consciousness and mine. And therefore, wherever God is, I am. If I make my bed in hell, whomever shall I fear? That is also a spiritual law. I cannot get away from God. God is the very consciousness of me, and I cannot get away from my own consciousness. Yes, if that is true, why are any of us ever in a state of sin, sickness, death, and limitation? Because we do not know this truth. The little prescription that Jesus gave us, know the truth. He never said the truth will make you free, but to know the truth. It is your conscious knowing of the truth that makes you free. Truth is right here in this very room. All the music, all the languages, all the skills, right in this room. But until we let it into our consciousness, we cannot be musicians, sculptors, architects. So with God, only in the degree that you accept, really understand His word, feel and gain the conviction of God as a reality, having being, the reality of your being. So you feel this oneness, this contact. Only in that degree can you prove the law that says that no harm can come to you. No weapon formed against you can harm you. That that must sound pretty strange to people who are out getting wounded and hurt. There are lots of weapons being formed against them, and they're being badly harmed. As a matter of fact, the weapons are winning out. Let's not fool ourselves. The Bible is law. The scripture is law. Not only the scripture that we call the Old and New Testaments. Any weapon that is formed against him shall not prosper. To whom is that addressed? Only to you who accept and have the actual conviction of the presence of God. All the others are those to whom the Bible says, thy days are numbered, and states that they are going to be wiped out, that the Lord is angry with them and is going to do away with them. Certainly, no weapon that is formed against thee can prosper. There's no place where the presence of God does not exist. From the bottom of the seas to the topmost sky is the presence of God. But it is only the conscious awareness of God that does the trick, and that is spiritual living. From the moment that you have this conscious awareness of the presence of God, something wonderful begins to happen. You may have sat in a draft and caught a cold. Once you realize the presence of God, you can sit in a draft and you won't catch a cold. You can violate all the germ laws when you have the conscious awareness of the presence of God. They are only beliefs, not laws. They are like fads. They change every few years. If you should ask a doctor whether he would practice medicine according to the medical books of many years ago, he would laugh at you. For today, Materia Medica itself laughs at many of those things they really believed in that generation. You become free of these world beliefs only as you individually renounce them and understand that they do not exist as law, but as beliefs. That is the entire secret of metaphysics, where healing comes in. Let us say with the Master, I have overcome the world. All it means is that I've come into the realization that nothing of this world has power. Nothing in this world, whether in the form of thought or thing, has jurisdiction or government or control over me. I am in this world, but not of it. I can enjoy shows with a friend. I can enjoy dancing and the companionship of friends. One of the outstanding phases of spiritual living is joy, as well as happiness, peace, and contentment. This means the ability to enjoy vacations, good trips into the mountains, or any other form of living, and yet be so untouched that if the opportunity to do these things did not arise, you would not find them necessary. You stand so completely in control of your own being and your own body that you understand that God, acting as your infinite intelligence, is a law into all your experiences, and nothing out here can enter to defile it or to make a lie. Are you commencing to catch just a little glimpse? Do you begin to understand that spiritual living hasn't anything to do with removing your normalcy or naturalness? It won't make a saint out of you, except that you will not be touched by the world. You can be in it, but not touched by it. You can have all the health and wealth in the world and not dissipate it. You can live with all there is in the world today and yet not miss these things. It is not ambition or health or wealth. It is this: recognition of the presence of God as your individual life, and letting all good things be added. On top of that, it is the realization that the thoughts and things of the world cannot enter your consciousness to defile. They have no presence or power over you and find no outlet through you. All that flows out from me is love. Not my love, but God's intelligence. Not my intelligence, but God's. This is spiritual living. The very moment you understand that all the good anyone expresses is God showing through, you commence catching glimpses of spiritual living. The moment you think of any intelligence or any skillfulness or any virtues or any demonstrations as being an evidence of your understanding, then your senses are warped and you're heading for trouble. Watch out. If it were not for that horrible mistake, Jesus would have been spared the experience of the crucifixion. Let me read that again. The very moment you understand that all the good anyone expresses is God showing through, you commence catching glimpses of spiritual living. The moment you think of any intelligence or any skillfulness or any virtue or any demonstrations as being evidence of your understanding, then your senses are warped and you are heading for trouble. Watch out. If it were not for that horrible mistake, Jesus would have been spared the experience of the crucifixion. There is nothing good but God. There's no one loving but God. God lives his own life individually as you and as me, and that is what constitutes our immortality. If ever you want to cut that short, just believe that you have a life of your own and see how naturally it will come to an end. God is the life of the individual, and that is what makes immortality. The credit is God's. The only credit to you is that when the vision came to you, you accepted it. If you can accept the fact that God is the only life that is living and the only mind expressing its intelligence as you, then any dependence on human ties is shifting the balance to the side of materialism, to the side of limited living. So let's be normal and live our lives as joyously and normally as we can, and get all the joy we can out of human companionships, whether they're husband, wife, child, parent, friend. Let's not go up into the stratosphere and believe that our spiritual life in any way separates us from peace, contentment, and fulfillment. You do not break the ties of human relationships, but you bring them to a higher level and understand that God is the life of your husband, your child, your wife, your friend. In this way, you form a bond much closer and much more meaningful than any blood or affectational tie. Let's just pause for a minute and meditate on that understanding that God is our life, and that each individual is an expression of God, just as we acknowledge when we do our universe meditation. Everyone in our household, in our city, in our state, country, universe is an expression of God, God appearing as. And we can know this for family and friends, basically for those loved ones who are open to this. But keep in mind that there are those who won't be open to this, who may have mocked you, who may not believe in any sort of spiritual truth. And we will automatically know our understanding, our principle about their reality, but it may not be welcomed. So we just understand that quietly and then realize. Again and again, I'm reminded with the help of the Edgar Cayce tapes and Dolores Cannon that we are tied karmically through agreements made before we came to Earth that we've forgotten, to the people in our lives. Some of those are very cooperative, and some are not. It's all just part of the drama. Villains, heroes. Again, nothing personal. So let's do a little work on the next chapter. Title is Spiritual Freedom. You know, this is not the easiest subject in the world to talk about, and I approach it always with a little bit of hesitancy. Always we've been talking about the spiritual way of living, and of course the subject spiritual freedom is a part of the spiritual way of living. Spiritual freedom is a result of the spiritual way of living. It is one of the results, but it has to be understood in order to be demonstrated. It has to be understood in order to be lived. In our material sense of life, we are in bondage. We are in bondage to hundreds of different thoughts and things. There's no denying it. We're so apt in the metaphysical world just to say, there's no accident in divine mind, or there's no bondage in divine mind. Of course, it's true. There isn't bondage in divine mind. It's also true that if we were living in divine mind, we would not be here speaking or listening to this subject. It is only because we haven't yet reached the life of divine mind that we're interested in a way or a path to achieve it. The term path or way is an interesting one. Jesus said, I am the way. But 600 years before Jesus, Lao Tzu's teaching in China was called the way. The term way refers to that spiritual path that gives us freedom. If we were to achieve freedom, it must be freedom from some form of bondage. Actually, there is no freedom in spirit or soul because there isn't anything to be free of. There's only divine being. When we talk about spiritual freedom, we're talking really about a quality or a condition of being that results from our search for an attainment of truth itself. I'm coming to this very, very slowly because I am, and I know that I am, on a delicate subject. You will appreciate as I go along how delicate it is because I'm going to say to you right here that I'm leading up to the fact that there is a power greater than any of the powers you are familiar with in the human sense of life, and yet a power that you will never see, never hear, taste, touch, or smell. It is a power that you will discern only with your spiritual senses. And if you cannot be lifted up to the point of spiritual discernment, you never will know the meaning of spiritual freedom. That's what makes it delicate. The fact that it isn't something I can say to you intellectually and that you can grasp intellectually and then say, oh, I understand. I understand that. No, you would have a much easier time with the Einstein theory than you will with the subject of spiritual freedom, because there is the possibility of developing the human mind to the degree of grasping and understanding the Einstein theory. But you never can develop your human thinking, your human mind, your intellect to the degree that you will understand spirit and spiritual activity. So remember that we are touching this from the standpoint of opening our consciousness to the recognition and the discernment of a presence and a power that you won't see. You will see the result of it, much in the same way that if you plant a seed in the ground, and if you were able to put a microscope over that seed and watch its full development, you would never see the life or activity producing what you can see through the microscope. In other words, you could watch the seed break open. You could watch the little formations come out. You could watch the roots take hold. You could watch the shoots come forth. But never do you see the life or the power, that which is called nature. You never can see nature or the activity of nature. You can see only its results. And so in this spiritual life, even when you've attained or are attaining spiritual freedom, you will never see, never actually witness that which is bringing it about. But as your consciousness of truth opens, as this seventh sense develops within you, then you will be able to enjoy this spiritual freedom. And in your higher moments of illumination, you will be able to see the whole of its operation. We are told in scripture that, yet in my flesh have I seen God. It is possible, while yet being in what we call the human sense of life, to behold God. but not to behold God with the eyes. We behold God through that seventh sense, spiritual consciousness or spiritual discernment. Now let us start low down on the scale with the idea or thought of bondage to bondage to person, place, and thing. The mother who continuously is in fear of what will happen to her child cannot let the child out of her sight. And she is in this bondage. She is in bondage to mother love. She is in bondage to the fear of a power apart from God. To fear that there is a power that can prevent God's protection from being made manifest. That is one form of bondage. There's another form of bondage that says we must live in that place where we were born, in that town or city or state or country. This is a form of bondage that won't permit us to be pioneers. This form of bondage won't permit us to get up and go and live where we want to live, build in some other place. That is a form of bondage too. There is another form of bondage, and that is bondage to payroll. We work so often under conditions that are not harmonious, conditions that do not make for happiness. We work for people who do not understand us. And the answer is, well, I need the money. In this sense of spiritual freedom, there is no denying your need for money. The only denial is that you have to be in bondage to a particular place of employment. The bondage consists of your acceptance of the belief that you can't break free and seek employment elsewhere, that you can't seek it in some line of work where you are happier or freer. That's a form of bondage too, remaining in a place where you, of your own volition, would never remain, or remaining in some line of activity where you, if you could select, if you could choose, would not remain. That's bondage. There is bondage to superstition, and we have so many forms of superstition. Not only being afraid to walk under a ladder, there are other forms of superstition. Theological superstition, for instance. One of the great fears of people is that we will live to only 80 years and 10. That's a form of bondage, because when that thought grips you, you start right after your 50s to wonder how soon you will be reaching 70 and how awful it is going to be. There is the law of heredity, which isn't a law, but a fear or a belief. The ancient Hebrews thought that the sins of the fathers are visited on the children unto the third and fourth generation. Yet 200 years later, they renounced that belief. But we here in this modern age have not accepted the renunciation, and we have accepted their old superstitious beliefs. So we are walking around with diseases and habits due to heredity. We have accepted certain forms of limitation for ourselves because of racial heredity or religious or national heredity. That is a form of bondage. We meet many people in this world who are in bondage to their sins. These seem to be the most miserable of all because they cannot shake the idea. Their old religion, their old theology has impressed on them that they have sinned against some law, usually some foolish man-made law, and that they are going to be eternally damned, not only here on earth, but even into the future. That is a form of bondage too, a very acute form of it. In the medical world, we are under the bondage of the beliefs in climate, the germ theory, the vitamin theory. These are forms of bondage arising from theories built on human histories. You might say, isn't there some truth to them? No, there isn't any truth to them, because truth is of God, and none of those theories are of God. They are facts in the human sense of life. But the human sense of life is the bondage I'm talking about. I'm breaking down the human sense of life into these various forms. But the whole human sense of life, even when it is good, is a form of bondage. Now, of course, along with that comes all the beliefs incident to the material organism, the belief that there is life in the heart, or that when other vital organs or functions are interfered with, our life is interfered with. Of course, right there, we're told, oh no, I understand, but my life isn't interfered with, but my body is. What I'm saying is that your life isn't interfered with, nor is your body, except in proportion to your own bondage to the beliefs of materiality, the beliefs that the organs and functions of the body can contain within themselves the issues of life. That's a form of bondage to the body, and that has to be broken. And we have other forms of bondage too. It's really sad that even into our enlightened experience come those beliefs for our acceptance. Too often we do accept them and demonstrate them. With all these forms of bondage, you come up against the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, no other power, no other presence, no other life, no other mind, no other intelligence, no other directing force but God. All of this other business is idolatry. It is placing faith and power in an effect. Don't ever forget this. We are not in the earth. That belief is a form of superstition and a form of bondage. The earth is within us. It is a formation of the infinite consciousness which I am. It is a form of divine being which has been made, created by that universal intelligence, which really is your individual consciousness. By all the laws of God, you yourself created the heavens and the earth, your consciousness which you are, and therefore they are subject unto you. Let us be done with bondage to anything that exists in the realm of effect. We are not in bondage to our concepts of spiritual reality, nor are we in bondage to the reality itself. Our only bondage, if bondage it is, and it is a beautiful one, is the Christ, the divine idea of government, the divine idea of infinite intelligence. And this is the only thing that we are subject unto. Divine consciousness, universal consciousness, that which we call God, which is individual consciousness, yours and mine, that is the law of our individual being. Through that, we individually are given dominion over the things of the sea and the earth and the air and the sky. And when you either knowingly or unknowingly permit something in the realm of effect to be a law unto you, you have become in bondage to it. Thank you, Joel.